When thinking about 2020 in the module technology space, generally the module technology space right now is very exciting, very dynamic times in the module technology space. 5 years ago at the trade shows, most manufacturers had their 60 cell and their 72 cell and their mono and their multi, and that was more or less it. Today, manufacturers are working on bifacial, of course, larger wafers, multi-bus bar, heterojunction, smart wire, and on and on and on. There are a lot of different technologies that are being worked on in R&D and that are now being introduced commercially as well. However, if you are talking about what module technologies will be dynamic in terms of the largest single market share, I think probably for 2020 we'd still see half cut, probably monofacial, probably 158.75 millimeter as probably the largest single market share with made on a P-PERC cell architecture. That's my guess. I think bifacial is coming on strong, but probably won't have the largest single market share of any technology yet in 2020, maybe in 2021. It's easy to build a bifacial project that works. It's difficult to build a bifacial project that's fully optimized. There are many variables that impact bifacial yield gains that aren't present in a monofacial project. So, of course, albedo, or the reflectivity of the ground, is of course the fundamental most important contributor to bifacial energy yield gains, but also the racking designs, the height of the module, the height of the tracker, the height of the racking, the rotor-row spacing. There are many variables that are still yet to be optimized, and most importantly, the energy modeling community does not have a well-vetted, well-validated energy modeling best practices yet, fully developed, that is fully bankable. So I think probably the thing that's holding bifacial adoption back, if anything, is fully validated and fully accepted bifacial energy models that are financeable by all the banks. So today there are still a number of haircuts that are made or a number of conservative assumptions that are made because of a lack of data and a lack of field validation. I do think bifacial is a very compelling technology. I think it's probably the largest single step function improvement in both energy yield and levelized cost of electricity since the introduction of trackers. So that's a big deal. It's almost everywhere, I think, going to prove economically beneficial in a utility scale application. The further north you go in latitudes, I think the higher the bifacial yield gains. Of course, the cloudier environments, the more snowy environments, the bifacial yield gains will be higher. However, I think bifacial will pencil in most utility scale applications. Generally, the nature of the PV industry is that as the efficiency goes up and as the costs continue to come down, we keep, as an industry, hitting points where PV is the lowest cost of electricity in more and more and more countries where it wasn't before. Initially, PV was the most competitive in high cost of electricity, high irradiance markets. As the cost of installed solar energy comes down and as the efficiency goes up, there are always new horizons and new markets where PV is the most competitive source of electricity generation. So bifacial, I think, having the largest benefit in the northern latitudes will accelerate that trajectory in places, north in the Scandinavian countries. Bankability is literally the point of our existence. We were started, PVEL as a company was started about a decade ago to really address the topic of bankability. We are a test lab. We do reliability testing on PV equipment. We help large buyers and financiers understand the technology risks that they are assuming and absorbing and help mitigate those risks so certain risks introduced by technology innovation aren't being absorbed. So bankability ultimately, in my opinion, is being able to extract all of the value out of a specific technology And that means financing all of the energy yield that will be generated by that specific technology. So if the buyer and the seller and the financier are all in agreement on all of the energy yield characteristics of that specific PV technology, then it's a bankable product. It's difficult to say in this industry because, like we talked about earlier, the technology evolution is very fast right now. There are a lot of new technologies being worked on, and at the end of the day, having 5+ years of field validation is simply not realistic for the pace of technology innovation that we're seeing. And so the implications of some of this technology evolution must be evaluated in laboratory conditions to be able to get some results in a commercially reasonable time frame. So that's what PVEL focuses on. That's what we've been focusing on since day one, about a decade ago, when we were first started. And ultimately, our objective is to accelerate the adoption of novel technology and reduce the risks by providing that independent third-party vetting sitting in between the buyers and the sellers. And this also helps the manufacturers in getting their novel technology accepted by the large financiers without taking the undue haircuts. I think the bankability rankings that Finlay presented earlier today are the most, by far, comprehensive view on that topic that I've seen before. So it's a very rigorous and very data-driven approach to determining bankability. I do think that the bankability rankings are probably most relevant for the utility scale space because the smaller volume manufacturers are getting penalized for having a smaller manufacturing capacity. So a lot of the higher efficiency technologies do have a lower production capacity, and those are mostly appropriate for the rooftop space because of the added cost and the higher efficiency. Of course, in a rooftop application, there is a higher premium for real estate. And so in the space-constrained applications, the high efficiency modules that are high priced and very, I think, bankable for rooftop applications perhaps are not coming out as high in the bankability rankings. But for utility scale space, I think the bankability rankings are the most rigorous attempt at bankability rankings that I've ever seen. So the US and import policies around the world are continuing to be a man-made disruption to the solar industry and to a lot of industries. The US is, of course, leading that charge and unfortunately has been since 2012. However, this is the new reality that we're all trying to be successful in. So I think when the bifacial exclusion was first announced about maybe 4 months ago, the price that we saw of bifacial modules relative to their monofacial counterparts did not plummet by the percentage of the tariff. So the manufacturers, for a brief period of time, were making a pretty healthy gross margin on the bifacial modules that they were selling in the US market. So similarly, now that the bifacial exclusion has gone away and the tariffs will be reapplied, I don't think that the price should shoot back up because it didn't plummet when the exclusion was first implemented. And so probably the entities absorbing the hit will be predominantly the manufacturers. So they made nice margins for several months, and I think that's great because I think they need to make some money every once in a while. And probably bifacial pricing will continue to maintain a very slight premium over monofacial pricing, but will not have a substantial premium. The fundamental cost adder for manufacturers for bifacial versus monofacial, there is some marginal cost premium, maybe for the smaller junction boxes, for the PoE encapsulants rather than EVA encapsulants. The front side efficiency maybe takes a 0.1% hit. So maybe there's a 1 cent, half a cent cost premium on a per watt basis for bifacial versus monofacial. And so the price at the end of the day should be reflective of that. So I don't think the module space is consolidating. I think the names are changing. I think some of the leaders today weren't brand names that folks knew 5 years ago. So 10 years ago, most people said, or many people said, that by 2020, we're going to have 3 large, giant, mega module manufacturers like GE and Siemens and other large conglomerates. In reality, today, we have well north of 100 PV module manufacturers still active. The names are changing. There are new entrants coming in all the time. There are brand names people don't even know of yet that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on novel factories on the latest and greatest technology. So I think the market share of the top 10 is growing, but the long tail of manufacturers that have sub 1 gigawatt capacity or maybe sub 2 gigawatt capacity is still very long and will continue to be very long.